Welcome to the It's Better Together podcast, where intelligent conversations turn dreams into action, with hosts Marcy Stout and Allison Nissen. Each episode highlights inspirational women and practical business advice from the Revel Coach Tuesday at 2 live programs. From building a website to securing more clients, we cover topics that are interesting to you. In this episode of It's Better Together, we speak with Nan Carney-DeBord about her journey from the athletic field to Associate Vice President and Director of Athletics at Denison University. As a young college student, Nan asked her coach why women athletes were treated differently than their male counterparts. When she heard an answer she didn't like, she launched her commitment to create a better answer. Today, Nan is one of the few female athletic directors in college sports and a role model for women everywhere. Let's meet Nan.
That was a funny time, and Marcy and Allison and I were just talking about, some of your pivotal moments that you don't know are pivotal when you're doing it. I was playing college basketball, and a lot of my friends were on the men's team, and at night I had to study a lot, Sarah Truebridge, and so I would go home and have to do laundry and study because we didn't get our practice gear washed. But my friends on the men's team got their practice gear washed, and I thought that was awfully strange. So I asked my coach the next day, and she said, you should ask the women's athletic director. So I didn't know who that was, but I found her, and I'm not sure I should share this really what she actually said, but I'm going to, because we've come a long way, babies. She said, well, women don't sweat, they perspire. And so I, of course, proceeded. Now, mind you, up front, I did grow up in South Jersey, so I can't always control myself. So the next day after practice with a teammate, because you can't go alone when you're challenging authority, of course, we laid our practice gear on the director's desk, and it was stinky and soaked and everything else. And lo and behold, that year we had our practice gear washed 3 times a week. I guess we sweat 3 times and perspired the other 4 or whatever. I'm not really sure. But from that point on, after the 3 times a week, the laundry service was in place for men and women. Really, really small, but it's funny because there's a woman on, I saw her face from my first, she was my first generation as a college coach. And in her generation, a similar experience happened. Now flash forward, I'm into college coaching. And one of her teammates, we called a timeout, and one of her teammates sat on the bench, and the uniforms were too small, and the budget was half of the men's at my previous institution. And so the whole crotch of the short ripped out. And I guess I was really good at laying things on, people of leadership's desk. So after the game, I think we won with 6 players, right, Rach? I took those, I said, hey, throw me your shorts, when you're done. And I took them and laid them on the provost's desk. And next year the budgets were equal. And the uniforms fit more than my stuffed animals at home. So yeah, that was my start in college athletics and equity.
I think that's so amazing that, it takes courage to stand up for yourself. But sometimes it really just takes asking the question. So when you approach a challenging situation with a simple question as to why, it opens that door without feeling like you're doing something wrong.
Right. Yeah. And that's true. And, I was always curious, and, I grew up in the generation, I'm older probably than everyone on the call, but, when Title IX, 1972 to 1976. It was really funny backstory. When I got to Denison, we had an OCR investigation, and there were 3 attorneys that came in and deposed me for 3 straight hours. I had to remind them that, I needed a potty break at one point, but I was stunned at their lack of historical knowledge of Title IX as it pertained to sport and gender equity. Now we're more involved in sexual assault and sexual misconduct, but the whole history of Title IX, they kind of didn't have a full understanding. So by the end, the university attorney said, "Good job educating them." But yeah, from 1972 to 1976, I was in high school, and that's when Title IX, and I believe the bill was signed in Philadelphia. And I was telling Marcy and Allison that, in high school basketball, we played in this gym that was called the Pit, and it was surrounded by these what are they called? Register heaters. So anyway, it was just awful. And you had to put your foot up against the wall to be able to enter the ball, because the wall was right on the end line. And one day our coach came in and said, "Yeah, we get to play in the boys' gym," which was this brand new gym with regular seat, but it was called the boys' gym. And so once again, I think we got to practice twice a week in the boys' gym. So, when you're living history, you don't really know what it is, but you just ask the questions.
I love it. And Nan, thinking of progressing, so it's almost 50 years later, how do you describe the leadership within athletics now as it relates to, say, diversity and inclusion, and the difference between the stories you're describing now and stories today, but within today, there's still, some differences. So how do you describe leadership in sports as it relates to gender equality and that?
Well, I feel in many ways, there has been so much growth and development, but also in many ways, we haven't gotten some things right. And I know that, once again, I asked the question, when we have, I'm committed to anti-racism and how we can finally get things right. But I do think leadership has changed significantly. I came up through the ranks. One of my other favorite stories, other than the sweaty jersey story, is when I was at my previous institution, the director changed. So it was from one white male to the next white male. And he said, "Hey, do you have any interest in athletic administration?" I was a tenure track faculty member. I was coaching 2 sports. And I, was busy. And I said, "Yeah, when I'm older." Here it is. And so he brought me on board, and I learned a tremendous amount from his mentorship. But once again, so my first conference meeting, so this is the North Coast Athletic Conference. I have been in the conference now 1 year less. It was established in 1984, and I came to my previous job, which was Ohio Wesleyan University, in 1985. And my first meeting was probably around 88, 89, when he asked me to come on board. And I was the only woman in the room. And in fact, the commissioner was a male and everything. And in fact, it was suggested that I sit in the back of the room and just observe in my first meeting. So I observed a room full of men doing their thing. And now we have a woman commissioner of the conference, and I believe we're about 50% women directors and 50% male directors. And so we're pretty excited. And, and at Denison, when I came full circle back to my alma mater, just finishing my 9th year, going into my 10th year, my basketball coach was an assistant athletic director, or maybe she was associate, but I promoted her right away and told her she could do whatever she wanted except for laundry. And And so she was my senior associate athletic director. And then the assistant athletic director, who is now my senior associate, I promoted her to associate director. So we started out with, not only the first woman AD at this institution, but also, a leadership team of women. So I think, I think I'd like to think that we've made a lot of progress, because when you see through the eyes of a diverse perspective, you grow. And that's one of our core values as a department, is a growth mindset. And I think we've been able to instill that in our staff. We've done some really unique and incredible things, but I think I'm most proud that, we have led with women.
And it's so obvious to me. So to those of you that we haven't met, Alice and I, disclaimer, we did go to Denison and we do love Denison. But we had gone back to campus. It was, I guess, maybe almost a year ago, or maybe 8 months ago. And we were reintroduced to Denison through Nan and the athletics department. And our experience being back on campus, there's such like a culture and a vibe of the Denison Center. Like it's, and we have a few of our interns are, Denison athletes, and they share their experience about how you're so much more than an athlete. It's the student first and the student athlete experience, but they have a lot of, beyond their own coach, there's a lot of opportunities within athletics. Can you just describe how your leadership team creates this culture of one team for athletics at Denison? Describe a little more of the student athlete experience.
Well, first of all, if any of our student athletes are on this call, you inspire me, you motivate me. I've learned so much from you, and that's true for all of my student athletes that may be on this call, but my former student athletes. But one of the things that we did when I started out 9 years ago, is I just sort of observed, and what I did in my leadership style is I interviewed every head coach and every department head. So every director, director of sport medicine, director of facilities, and so on. And I spent anywhere from an hour to 3 hours. One conversation went about 3 hours. And I asked them three questions. What do you love most about working here? What do you love least, or what do you like least? And then what keeps you up at night? And those three questions gave me a real incredible window to whom I was about to lead. And then I had negotiated this. I wasn't on payroll yet. And then I took about 3 weeks away. We have a cabin on a lake in Maine. And I just reread all of my notes and then reflected. And I recognized that we had incredible success, but we also had a lot of silos. And so I thought, I've spent my life's work in leadership development even before it was a buzzword. And I had the opportunity to teach a senior seminar at Ohio Wesleyan, and then they asked me to teach an entry-level class too in leadership. And so I started at the ground roots with different authors like Lencioni and John Maxwell, and really on the ground level of leadership. And so what I thought we would work better to do, some of the individuals, and this is not a big school. I mean, we're 2,300, and the athletic center is quite impressive, but I thought we have about 70 in our division, but some people didn't even really know each other. So what we did is, with my associates, I asked them to help me, because I didn't know anyone, create teams that were extremely diverse. And that's how we functioned ever since. So when you come to work at Denison, you are, a part of leading your program, but you're also a part of our department team. And so you might be the head swimming coach, and you'd be on a team with the assistant football coach and the sports information director and administrative assistant. And that's where we started developing our values competency model. So who are we? What do we value? And how is that going to play out? What is that going to look like in action? So it was about 18 months, for the first iteration. We had about 3 or 4 iterations. We even came up with the little wheel. We had a contest. It was a mountain and it was a tree and it was a lot of different things. And we had 55 different values that we all developed. But these aren't my values. These are the department values. So the center of the wheel is competitive excellence. And the supporting 6 spokes are leadership and teamwork, and leadership is a function of teamwork. Most people who know me know that I do nothing alone, and I've achieved nothing alone. The other 2 spokes are integrity and trust, and the foundational pieces are commitment to diversity, inclusion in thought and action, and having a growth mindset. So to this day, if I'm in a hiring process or an evaluation process, I share our core values. And once again, they're our core values. So as a result of having strong core values, I think each program, I'm really fortunate to work with master coaches. I have incredible leaders in leading every one of our programs, but it also allowed them the freedom to continue to explore the values of their program, but also knowing that they needed to align with those of the department, and ours aligned with those of the strategic vision of the university and the mission. So that's how we started. And if you feel that vibe coming on campus, that's exciting. You'll see that simple little wheel hanging in different places. We have it on a little coaster. We have it in different places for us to recognize what it means. And we talked, after all of the awfulness that has been going on in our society, we talked a lot about how we should best operationalize our spoke of diversity and what that's going to look like, because we haven't gotten it right yet at Denison or in our countries. So we take on challenges. We have the hard conversations, but at the same time, I think it's a culture of respect and a culture of support. And if the student athletes feel that, then that's really good. But a key value of us is for us is creating an environment structurally conducive to optimum motivation and making an environment where our student athletes have just a quintessential experience.
Man, I'd like to ask, and I feel like I know a little bit of the insight into Denison and sports, having been able to work with you, and every conversation we have is so inspirational. But I know that the student athletes, when they graduate from Denison, have such a vast amount of skills, not just from the field, but from off the field. And so how do they take those Denison values that you've created out to the world?
Yeah, so, I'm happy you say that, and I know we're working together, so we've had these conversations, but as you know, one of the, I talk, one of my favorite quotes is, "It's not the honor you take with, but the heritage you leave behind." And that was stated by Branch Rickey, who was actually an Ohio Wesleyan graduate, while signing Jackie Robinson, the first African-American baseball player in the MLB. And so I often talk about leaving a legacy. And I do that when we do our first year experience with our athletes. I do it at a 4-year banquet. They hear it a lot. I think you have to hear it 7 times before you remember it. So they're going to hear it that way. But one of the visions I had was how could we be intentional about what you just asked, is having our student athletes recognize those life skills, first of all, and be intentional through emotional intelligence skills training and really becoming self-aware and self-regulated and learning how to develop empathy. And then teach them through sport, those are skills you learn through the sport experience, and how they can give them a bump in life after Denison. So for instance, that's why it's been so magical working with you all, because you have leveraged the team experience. We had the team experience and the cultures we thought were in place, and you've just ignited them. So now they feel comfortable in their teams and understanding this concept of networking and how to leverage what they've learned through sport, persistence, even the tough ones like adversity. Right now, COVID, race relations, race challenges, and integration and inclusion. If you're not leading right now and being able to adapt to adversity, I learned adversity through sport. You lose games, you lose things in life. So how do you leverage that? And so I hope I've answered your question, but I think we've been really intentional about reminding our student athletes. We were able to, through the generosity of an incredible alum, roll out the Knetzer Family Institute for leadership development through sport. But we talk about character, mentorship, and leadership development. And so we have a pedagogy for our student athletes, a first-year program, a second-year, third, fourth-year program. I meet a lot with senior leadership of different programs, and it's become, I started out, I tried to make it more organic than imposed. You ask me, I come. And so that's been kind of fun to watch. But we also are working really hard at developing our assistant coaches. We have an assistant coach early career mentorship program through the Knetzer. And then our head coaches are charged with continuing to develop. And so that growth mindset, the foundational piece of a growth mindset, and they are doing phenomenal work all the time. And we just keep getting better. And I'm so inspired by our coaches.
Yeah, you have a great coaching team. It's been nice for us to get to know them and meet them. And on the chat box, we had a couple questions, but I think you've actually been answering them along the way. But a couple of your student athletes that are here with us were asking about examples of instilling the core values into the athletes. So can you maybe give elaborate a little bit more on another example of how, when a student comes to Denison and they join a team, but the collective team, of how you invest in their, in the core values and how you instill them?
Right. Well, so another piece of the Knetzer, or there's about 5 umbrella pieces, because we added now career networking to that, under that umbrella, but it's team culture. And so once again, we're very intentional about team culture. And I never wanted to be a leader in this position that sat behind her computer all day and didn't really know our students, because every day, the reason why I do everything that I do is for their benefit. So I better know them. And I don't always know them as first and second year students. Each year I get to know them a little bit more, but by the time they graduate, I know most of them pretty well. And that's helpful when we're putting them up for all of these many awards, because I usually have to write about them. So through talking with them and through observing them, if I have a strength, that's in observing behavior. And when you see me at a contest, I'm not a cheerleader. I mean, once in a while, if it's a good, play or a good something, really fast run or a swim, I'll do one of these, but I'm not a cheerleader. I'm usually observing behavior. In many sports, I either sit where I can observe the bench, or across from the bench, so I can observe how teams are responding to each other, because at the end of the day, it's about peer leadership, and it's about the energy. I mean, Kelly's a perfect example. What she gives, it's a mutual exchange of positive energy and peer leadership, and they play off each other. I don't think there's any one leader on any one team. I think there's a group of leaders that have been developed over a 4-year period. So that's where I see it happening. If, coaches are really, for the most part, really honest and transparent, because when you don't have a good team culture, it weighs heavily on the coach. Mm-hmm. And it's not fun. And, at the end of the day, this is sport. We should be having some fun somewhere. And so if there's not a positive team culture, then we're a little bit more intentional, and we look at ways we can create more positive portions to it, either with the coach leading, and we've vetted a couple of outside resources that we've also used with certain teams that are life coaches or team coaches, those types of things. And I think it's been really beneficial. I think your experience when you came back, and I think you visited the soccer meeting room, and you saw, was that right? And you just see it's John Gordon's quotes all over the walls. And, we talk about leaders being readers. I offer up my bibliography. I think it's 27 pages now. I've always kept what books I've read throughout my career. And, and I have an administrative assistant that helps me. She tells me to put my books on the top shelf, and then if I haven't added them, she adds them. So it's kind of fun when I speak or I want to share with someone. So leaders are readers, and John Gordon's we're a big fan of his reads.
Yeah, well, I loved how it was with the soccer team.
To watch a live Tuesday at 2 program with Revel Coach, visit us at revelcoach.com. Until next time.